What if you were driving a subway train with 340 people on board deep in the darkness of a tunnel and suddenly saw someone standing on the tracks, but the control center assures you there's no one there? Would you trust your eyes or the instruments? What happened in that tunnel forever changed the life of a train operator named Thomas. This is the story of a miracle of the Virgin Mary that no one expected. But before we continue, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I'd love to see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary are reaching. The alarm clock rings at 4 in the morning. It's Tuesday, an ordinary November day in New York. Thomas gets up before sunrise, as he has done for 18 consecutive years. At 45, Thomas knows every inch of the subway tunnels. He started out as a maintenance technician. Since childhood, he had been fascinated by that underground world, that complex network of tunnels and stations that keeps an entire city moving. It took 5 years of rigorous training before he was promoted to operator, 5 years memorizing every curve, every signal, every safety protocol. And for the next 13 years as a train driver, not a single incident, not even a significant delay, not one unnecessary sudden break. In the kitchen of his modest apartment, Thomas makes coffee while the city still sleeps. The place is simple but organized, no luxuries. A subway driver earns a decent living, but he isn't rich. And Thomas never cared about that. He enjoys what he does. He likes the routine, the precision, the responsibility. Elizabeth, his companion for 11 years, is still asleep. She works regular hours, so their schedules rarely overlap during the week. But on weekends, they have their time together, calm conversations, unhurried meals, walks around the neighborhood. Elizabeth was raised in a traditional Catholic family. Every Sunday she goes to Mass. Thomas completely respects that, but never joins her. He grew up without religion. It's not that he's against it, it just isn't part of his life. Elizabeth occasionally invites him, especially on important dates, and he always politely declines without judgment. They never argue about faith. It's simply one of the differences between them, like her preference for tea and his for coffee. Mutual respect, that's what sustains their relationship. Thomas finishes his coffee, washes the cup, leaves everything in its place. At 4:35, he leaves the apartment. The streets are quiet at that hour. Thomas likes to walk to the station. It's a 15-minute walk. He could take another subway, it would be faster, but those 15 minutes are his moment of mental preparation. He observes the city gradually waking up, the first lights turning on in apartment windows, the smell of bread from the bakeries, the cold morning air. At 5 o'clock, Thomas enters the station through the back, where the lockers and staff offices are located. The place has that characteristic smell of institutional coffee and cleaning products. Some co-workers are already there, changing clothes, getting ready for their shifts. Thomas greets each one with a nod. He's not much for long conversations, but he's cordial. In the locker room, he changes clothes with automatic movements, motions repeated thousands of times. The uniform, always impeccable. In the briefing room, Supervisor Gregory is reviewing the day's alerts on a clipboard. Gregory has 22 years of experience, 2 more than Thomas. They respect each other, that quiet camaraderie of veterans who have seen everything. "Everything's calm today," Gregory says without looking up from the clipboard. "No mechanical alerts, no maintenance work, no special situations." Thomas just nods. Better that way. Quiet days are good days. There's a quick coffee with the other train operators on shift. Casual talk about family, last night's game, weekend plans, nothing special. At 5:20, Thomas heads to the platform. His train for the day is already there. 8 gleaming cars under the fluorescent lights. The night shift maintenance technicians are finishing the last checks. Thomas walks the entire length of the train. He visually inspects doors, windows, external lighting systems. It's not paranoia, it's procedure. The technicians do their job well, but Thomas likes to see things with his own eyes. "All clear," says one of the technicians, handing him a printed report. "Brakes checked, doors tested, electrical systems operational." Thomas skims through the report, signs in the proper field. Trust, but verify, always. Inside the driver's cabin, the space is tight, made for one person only. Thomas settles into the familiar seat, adjusts the side mirrors, checks the instruments. He tests communication with central control, clear signal. Checks the interior lighting of the cars through small monitors, everything working. He activates the door system, opening and closing synchronized across all cars. Mental checklist complete. Thomas takes a deep breath. He's ready. At 5:45, the first passengers begin arriving on the platform. The movement is still moderate, but will increase in the next few hours. At exactly 6 o'clock, the system closes the doors automatically. Thomas starts the train with a smooth, precise motion. The train enters the tunnel. The station lights fade behind them. Surrounding darkness, broken only by the emergency lights flashing in sequence along the walls. The familiar sound of metal against metal. Thomas is relaxed. It's the start of another ordinary day. The first 3 hours pass without incident. Thomas completes 6 round trips, each perfectly on schedule. The stations fill progressively as rush hour approaches. On the 7th trip, the train already carries 340 people. Passengers standing in the aisles, holding onto the bars. Mothers with small children in their arms. Workers with tired faces, staring at their phones. Departure from the station happens smoothly. Everything absolutely normal in the first few minutes. Thomas monitors the distance to the next station. 1.5 kilometers ahead. Straight track. No surprises. And then something changes. It isn't something Thomas can see on the instruments. It's not a warning light turning on, not a different sound coming from the engine. It's a feeling in his chest. An inexplicable anticipation, as if something important is about to happen. Thomas frowns. In 18 years, he's never felt this before. He checks the instruments again. Constant speed. Everything is exactly as it should be. But the feeling doesn't go away. It grows. It gets stronger with every second. Thomas's hands begin to sweat slightly. He wipes his palms on his uniform pants, trying to ignore it. But he can't. His breathing becomes deeper. His heart races for no apparent reason. There's a tension in his shoulders that wasn't there before. Something is wrong. Every system says everything is fine, but something is wrong. Thomas sharpens his focus. His eyes scan the tunnel ahead with greater intensity. The emergency lights flash in their usual sequence. The sound of the tracks is steady, hypnotic, just as it always has been. But there's something different in the air. Impossible to define what. It's like that feeling you get when you walk into a room and know something has changed, but you can't pinpoint exactly what it is. Thomas grips the control tighter. The train keeps moving forward in the darkness. 340 people behind him, trusting him to take them safely to the next stop. And that feeling in his chest keeps growing. Near the station, the train's headlights illuminate the tunnel ahead, and then he sees it. There's a woman standing on the tracks. She's wearing a long, light blue dress. A white veil partially covers her head. She is standing still, facing the approaching train, as if waiting for it. Thomas's brain processes the information in fractions of a second. Person on the tracks, imminent danger, must stop, now. But there's something else, something that makes no sense. In the darkness of the tunnel from that distance, Thomas shouldn't be able to see so many details, but he can. With astonishing, impossible clarity, the young woman's face, the serene expression, the dark eyes fixed directly on the cabin, as if looking through the glass, through the distance, straight at him. Her hands are positioned in a gesture of prayer. The blue dress seems to emit a soft, self-contained light. The white veil is immaculate, free from the usual dust of the underground environment. And then Thomas notices something even stranger. The sound of the train on the tracks is muffled, as if someone had stuffed cotton in his ears. He can hear his own quickened breathing. He can hear his heartbeat. The temperature inside the cabin drops. Thomas feels a sudden, inexplicable chill. And there's a scent in the air. Delicate. Flowers. There shouldn't be the smell of flowers in a subway tunnel, but the fragrance is there, unmistakable, comforting. Thomas blinks rapidly several times. Maybe it's fatigue, maybe some vision problem, maybe a reflection of light creating an illusion. But when he opens his eyes again, the woman is still there, serene, real. And Thomas feels with absolute and inexplicable conviction that he must stop. It's not a rational thought. It's like a silent command, but impossible to disobey. His hand moves toward the emergency brake lever, and he pulls. The braking system responds instantly. All 8 cars are engaged simultaneously. The deceleration is abrupt. The force of the braking thrusts all passengers forward. People standing lose their balance, desperately grabbing onto the poles. Objects fly across the cars. Bags fall. Phones slip from hands. Water bottles roll across the floor. Cries of surprise echo through the train. A mother clutches her small child tightly against her chest. An elderly man nearly falls, but is caught at the last second by a young man beside him. Panic spreads immediately. What was that? Why did we stop? What happened? The questions multiply, voices overlapping. In the cabin, the radio crackles to life. Gregory's voice cuts through the static. Thomas, what happened? We have an emergency stop registered in the system. Thomas grips the radio with a trembling hand. Gregory, there's a person on the tracks in front of us. A second of silence on the other end. Confirmed person on the tracks? Affirmative. Woman in a blue dress? Standing on the tracks, directly ahead of us. Gregory doesn't question it. He's known Thomas for years. He knows Thomas wouldn't hit the emergency brake without reason. Copy that. Dispatching rescue team. Hold position. Thomas doesn't take his eyes off the woman. She's still there, exactly in the same spot. The blue dress glows faintly under that impossible light. Then she smiles, a gentle, deliberate smile directed right at him. Thomas feels a wave of absolute peace wash over him. It makes no sense. He just made an emergency stop. He should be anxious, tense, bracing for consequences. Yet instead, there's this calm, deep and unexplainable. The woman raises both hands in a gesture of blessing. Slow, graceful movement. In the cars, passengers begin to calm down. Some are still shaken, but most already understand. Something must have happened on the tracks. It's part of living in a big city. These things happen. The rescue team arrives. 3 people, the coordinator, Samuel, and 2 technicians. They exit through the side of the train, powerful flashlights in hand, and start walking along the tracks. Thomas watches through the front window. The beams of light sweep through the tunnel. Samuel and the technicians reach the spot where Thomas saw the woman. The flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating every inch of the rails, the walls, the ground. The radio crackles again. Samuel's voice. Thomas, there's no one here. Thomas grips the radio tightly. I saw her. She was right there. We're doing a full sweep of the area up to the next station. Hold on. The team spreads out. The flashlights move in steady, professional patterns. They scan the tracks, the sidewalls of the tunnel. They look for any sign of human presence. Anything. Footprints in the dust, marks, clothing, any evidence at all. There's nothing. Samuel and the technicians walk a few more meters forward, closer to the station. Then one of the technicians stops and calls out to Samuel immediately. There's a person on the tracks. But it's not a woman in a blue dress. It's a man, young, maybe in his early 20s, lying on the ground, unconscious. Completely still, a phone rests on the ground beside his head. There's a visible cut on his forehead. Samuel runs over and kneels beside the person. He checks for a pulse. It's weak, but there. He checks for breathing. Shallow, but present. Alive. The young man is alive. Samuel immediately calls on the radio. Central. We have an unconscious victim on the tracks. Male, approximately 25 years old. Vital signs present, but weak. Head injury. We need paramedics. The team moves with trained precision. Samuel speaks to Thomas over the radio, his voice different now. Softer. Thomas, we found someone on the tracks. You found someone? Where? Right in front of you. A young man, unconscious. You saved his life. Silence in the cabin. Thomas can't process it. Samuel continues, if you hadn't stopped, if the subway had kept going. He doesn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone knows what would have happened. The victim is taken to the ambulance. The paramedics work quickly. The young man's life hangs by a delicate thread, but there is hope. Later, when everything calms down, when the reports are filled out and the security cameras reviewed, the full story comes to light. The young man had been standing on the platform. The cameras show him waiting, looking at his phone. And then, suddenly, he falters. He touches his head and collapses. He falls directly onto the tracks. No one on the platform notices. And the system records no anomaly. He hit his head in the fall, lost consciousness completely, stayed there on the tracks, right in the subway's path. If Thomas hadn't stopped, if he hadn't seen what he saw, felt what he felt, and pulled that emergency brake lever. The young man's name is Daniel, 23 years old, engineering student. At the hospital, doctors discover he has an undiagnosed heart arrhythmia. It was what caused the sudden fainting on the platform. Now he's under treatment. He will recover, because Thomas stopped the train, because Thomas saw a woman in a blue dress that no one else saw. Thomas finishes his shift in silence. Gregory is waiting for him in the yard when he finally parks the train at the end of the day. The two men embrace, no words, none needed. You did the right thing, Gregory finally says. You saved that young man. Thomas just shakes his head. I saw a woman. She was there, Gregory. I saw her. Gregory doesn't argue. He just squeezes Thomas's shoulder. What matters is that you acted, you trusted your instinct, and you saved a life. But Thomas knows it wasn't instinct. It was something more. He gets home early. Elizabeth is still at work. She won't be back until late afternoon. Thomas sits in silence in the apartment. He replays the scene over and over. The woman in blue, the serene smile, the gesture of blessing, the unexplainable peace. When Elizabeth finally arrives, she immediately senses something has happened. She knows when something has touched him deeply. What is it? She asks, sitting beside him. And Thomas tells everything, every detail, the strange feeling that began in his chest, the vision of the woman on the tracks, the impossible details he managed to see in the darkness, the blue dress shining, the white veil, the decision to stop, the discovery of the unconscious young man, the life saved. Elizabeth listens in complete silence, and when Thomas finishes, there are tears in her eyes. Without saying a word, Elizabeth walks to her bag. She returns with something small in her hands, a printed image on paper worn by time and constant use. She has always carried it, for years. It is the Virgin Mary, light blue dress, white veil, exactly as Thomas described. Thomas looks at the image, then at Elizabeth, then back at the image. The silence in the apartment is absolute. Thomas cannot speak. He only holds the image with trembling hands. In the following days, he goes back to work. He continues to be the technically perfect train driver he has always been. Punctual, careful, attentive. But something is different now. Before each shift, there is a moment of pause. It's not long, just a few seconds, and Thomas closes his eyes. And he prays, in his own way. But he prays, because now he knows. He knows there is something greater, something that protects, something that guides, something that intervenes when needed, How many lives have been saved by inexplicable intuitions? How many split-second decisions have prevented tragedies? How many prayers have been answered without anyone knowing? Thomas will never forget the woman in the blue dress. And somewhere, a young man named Daniel continues his life, his studies, his dreams, because in a dark tunnel on an ordinary Tuesday in November, something happened, something that cannot be explained, but cannot be denied. A miracle of the Virgin Mary. Do you believe that miracles of the Virgin Mary still happen today? Have you ever had that unexplainable intuition, that moment when something inside you told you to act, and later you discovered it changed everything? Share your story in the comments, because sometimes what you experienced may be exactly what someone needs to hear today. It may be the confirmation someone has been seeking. It may strengthen the faith of someone who is doubting. And if you know someone who needs to hear the story of the Virgin Mary's miracle, share this video. Because miracles happen in dark tunnels, in impossible moments, when we least expect them, they happen. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell to receive more stories of the miracles of the Virgin Mary, and share this video with someone who needs to renew their hope today. May the Virgin Mary continue to bless and protect you and your family. Amen.